around about 18% of the total emissions are actually driven through transport and vehicles. We need to get that down. We're all on board with that fact. It's about how we do that is the really interesting discussion point. In this country, as you know, electricity is generally powered by renewables, which is a fantastic advantage for Aotearoa, and it gives us huge opportunities to actually reduce emissions if we all agree on that plan and we get a nice pathway. At the same time, our transport infrastructure is interesting. It's clearly vulnerable to extreme weather conditions. We've seen that play out very recently. Global warming is a thing, despite what some people have been reported and saying recently. And just like ICE vehicles, internal combustion diesel vehicles, they rely on very strong infrastructure and roading. They require major investments in fueling. They just happen to be electrically driven, and the charging infrastructure is required, either public charging infrastructure or domestic charging infrastructure. And I'm sure our guests will talk a little bit about that tonight. Transport underpins how we get around. It's mobility. Think of how you got to where you are today. What happened after you woke up this morning, how you got to work, how you did your job, how you got here. It's how people get to school. It's how they get to their medical appointments. It's how we transport our family around. Transport is vital. And it's going to be vital for the next decade. It's just how we do it that is very important. Heavy commercial vehicles are important. Think about bikes, ferries, public transport, airplanes. We're going to go through quite a transformation in that area of transport. But tonight, we witness being within the election year. And we're going to be listening to the National Party and their thoughts around transport, the issues and their solutions to those. And I'd like to warmly welcome both our guests tonight. National MPs, the Honourable Scott Simpson, welcome, and Simeon Brown, welcome. Simeon is National Spokesperson for Transport and also Public Service. We'll keep the questions on the transport side, not the public service side, if that would be all right. Simeon also sits on the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee, and he is the member for Paparanga. Scott, on the other hand, is National Spokesperson for the Environment, Oceans and Water. He's member for the Coromandel and is a former Associate Environment Minister with a focus on waste. Scott sits on the Environmental Select Committee, and I alluded earlier on that he's also an EV driver. So he has some real world experience. Simeon will talk to you about what you're driving later on. Both of them are good friends of Drive Electric, and many of you will know that Drive Electric had a long relationship with the National Party, not quite why I'm wearing a blue shirt, but I can go back to 2016 when we were with the Minister of Transport, Simon Bridges, at that time, and he put up that first target of 64,000 EVs in this country. We all thought, hell, that's a big number. How are we going to do that? We kicked that one to touch about a year ago. So we're on the other side of that now. Different path we took to get there, but that was clearly a target, which I think we all clearly exceeded. Now, the stats locally are astonishing. We've had huge growth. I just think last year as an example, around 17% of all passenger cars registered in this country last year had a plug-in hybrids or completely BEV vehicles, 17%. I can go back to 2020 when it was 3%. Okay, so it's that start of that adoption curve, quite a significant increase. And I think this year, 2023, is going to be a turn year when we have huge momentum, we have growing availability of vehicles in the marketplace, and we've got demand side policies, rebate, and we've got supply side policies, the Clean Car Standard, and most of all, we've got good momentum. Back in 2016, Simon Bridges also announced a number of policies to try to stimulate the adoption of EVs. The contestable fund was brought in, and that several $1 million later has helped us in terms of charging infrastructure, getting the mindset shifted towards EVs, etc. And that was part of that accelerating that commitment. Also, I would probably add in there the RUX exemption that was put in at that point in time too. So two key policies back to that. We don't always agree with either side, and it's important to have that debate in quite an open forum. We're all an agreement on the end outcome or that end result. It's just merely the pathway we take and the levers that we use to get there. Now, the number one priority for you as members from our recent survey is around the charging infrastructure. And I know both gentlemen can mention that tonight and their thoughts around the public and private charging infrastructure. And we look forward to more ideas and questions in that area. Electrifying transport will obviously bring lots of other benefits to the country. Air quality is one that we often miss talking about. The health effects are quite significant. Energy independence and resilience is a big topic for this country, and electrifying the fleet will help in that area as well as decreasing running costs for mobility for households. But there's lots of issues to sort through, and the key here is business and the government has to work together to get the optimal results. And that's why it's also good to have you both here. So with that introduction, thank you, Simeon and Scott, for joining us. Incredibly grateful to have you both here. And I'm going to invite both gentlemen up to have a few words. We will then come back and have an open question time, and then we'll have a little bit of hospitality just at the back of the room. Thank you.
Well, Dean, thank you very much. I'm Scott Simpson. I'm the Member of Parliament for Coromandel, and I'm delighted to see that on the screen we have the meeting being recorded by a host or a participant. I'm keen to know which one of you is the TikTok person, because we're getting messages from Parliament that we should not be using TikTok and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just, not at all paranoid, but just how it is. Dean, thank you very much for your welcome. And Elroy, thank you very much for hosting, and your colleagues hosting very nice facility here tonight. I wanted, just before Simeon gets up and gives probably a bit more detail, I thought that maybe I should just outline some high-level general principles and sort of direction of travel perspectives around where the National Party sits, particularly in relation to climate change and particularly around decarbonising our transport fleet. So I want to make it very clear, because sometimes people sort of say, oh, well, the National Party is not committed to climate initiatives. We're not committed to climate goals or ambitions or objectives. And nothing, let me assure you, could be further from the truth. And I just remember quite fondly now, because it was very dramatic at the time. It was actually during John Key's government's time that National and the government of New Zealand signed up to the Paris Agreement. Nobody expected that to happen. In fact, at the time, I can remember people who were heading to the COP at Paris didn't think that we would ever get involved in it, that we would ever sign up to it. And then once that agreement had been signed off, it was then ratified by a national government as well. And so the point I want to make is that under Chris Luxon's leadership, we have a leader who comes to the role of leader of the opposition and as National Party leader, a person who actually has hands-on experience of walking the talk when it comes to climate action. And I'm not going to relitigate his commercial and corporate background. We all know that. But he has a track record of getting things done, of actually doing what he says he's going to do, and implementing it in a meaningful, practical, and real way. And that's the message that he talks to people like Simeon and myself and my other caucus colleagues about our role in the various spokespersons' portfolio responsibilities that we have. He always wants to know, what are the things that you're going to do? Don't tell me about the waffly, airy-fairy stuff. Tell me what you want to do and how you want to do it and how you're going to achieve it. And I think that is a mark of his professional and corporate background, but it's also an indication of his frustration generally with the malaise and the lack of action and focus and direction that we've seen in recent years in New Zealand. So we are completely 100% committed to achieving our climate goals and objectives. We are completely aligned with the objectives of Net Zero 2050. And that's important because over the next 27 years to 2050, there will be multiple changes of tenants in the beehive of various different political colours and hues. But it's really important for us as Kiwis that we have confidence enough to know that no matter what kind of government sits in the beehive over the next 27 years, there is a commitment to achieving those goals. It's not going to be a massive, sudden piling on of the brakes and a big flip flop and say, oh no, we're not going to do that climate change stuff anymore. We're not going to do the net zero anymore. The commitment to achieving that is bipartisan across the parliament. And it is, I think, important because the sorts of decisions that New Zealanders make in their personal lives, in their families, in their neighbourhoods, in their communities, in their business and corporate lives, those are decisions that they want to have be making, confident that the direction of travel isn't going to change. If they're going to be buying an EV, or if they are part of a business that wants to buy an expensive piece of capital equipment, or make a decision about what kind of design and building focus a new warehouse or a new high-rise or a new apartment block or whatever should have, they need to know that the direction of travel in terms of climate ambition and achievement is set. And so that's the broad picture. My friend and colleague, Todd Muller, is our agricultural spokesperson, and he is now also our climate spokesperson. And there's a degree of logic to that because 50% of our emissions come from agriculture. New Zealand is an economy that is broadly an agricultural economy. And if we don't crack the agricultural emissions conundrum, particularly around biogenic methane, we aren't going to achieve our objectives towards 2050. The other bigger area of emissions, and I don't need to tell you about this, of course, is transport, which is why we're here tonight. But in transport, we kind of know what we need to do. We have some answers. We know that we need to decarbonise our transport sector. We know that we need to decarbonise the fleet. And we actually have increasingly a broad range of tools, of vehicles, of designs and options that are presented to us that allow us a pathway through to decarbonising the transport fleet. Simeon's going to talk about more of the detail of that shortly, but I wanted to emphasise that for us as Kiwis, the agricultural part of the conundrum is really, really important. And I just want to, before I sit down, give you a bit of an indication. Todd Muller and I were actually on the Environment Select Committee that was did a trip to Europe, to the EU and to the UK prior to the passing of our zero carbon legislation. And the Environment Select Committee went to the EU and to the UK primarily to see what the regulatory and legislative framework was in other parts of the world and how it would be done, how we could do it in New Zealand. And of course, we've essentially adopted the UK model, an independent climate commission, and so forth, and all that goes with it. But when we got to Europe and the UK, everywhere we went, we would ask people, what are you doing about agricultural emissions? And they came back every single time with the same answers. Oh, well, we've got to get industrial heat under control. We've got to get transport under control. We need to fix our renewable electricity generation capacity. We need to do this, that, and the other thing. And then they would say, by the time we get to agricultural emissions, we hope New Zealand will have solved it for us. And so no pressure, New Zealand, but the point I'm trying to make is that it's not only important for us to do that as New Zealand Inc., it's important for the rest of the world because the rest of the world is looking to us to provide answers around agricultural emissions in a way that other countries and other economies don't have the same imperative. So that's why we talk a lot about that sort of stuff. But tonight we're here to talk about transport. My colleague Simeon Brown is our transport spokesperson, and it's my very great pleasure now to ask him to come and give some detail to the broad picture that I've just given you. Thank you very much. I didn't even talk about my EV. Oh, it's a beautiful EV. Beautiful EV.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. And can I just start also by acknowledging Customs Fleet for the opportunity, Customs Fleet for the opportunity to be here at your venue, and Drive Electric for hosting us. It is really great to be here, and to everyone in the room for taking the time out of your day to come and meet with us and listen, but also to engage. I'm really looking forward to the Q&A and actually engaging as much as I can talk and wax lyrical. I'm really keen to hear from you and to take on board your feedback. And I thought it was important that Scott spoke first, because the reality is that I wanted that scene to be set around our position when it comes to climate change and our commitment to net zero. And that is critically important, because I think we need to send a very clear message around that it is a bipartisan commitment, and there is a wide range of areas in our economy that are going to need to be changed, to change over the next 27 years. And so it is a significant change that we're under. So I just wanted to talk very, I guess, high level initially around transport, and then talk specifically around some of our views in regards to how we will be trying to continue to incentivize and increase the amount of electric vehicles on our road as we go along that decarbonisation journey, and also to talk about some of the ideas that we're considering, and I'm very keen to then hear your feedback around whether we're heading in the right direction. So I guess firstly, I'm really glad that Drive Electric's got the first word drive, because I love driving, and I think it's really important and critical that organisations like Drive Electric exist, because actually transport's about mobility, it's about getting where you need to go. And actually in the National Party, we believe in the idea of choice. We believe that you should have choice around how you get around, and that means private motor vehicles play a critical important part in that. We're a sparsely populated country, and we rely on a roading network which is under significant pressure. It needs significant investment. And whether you drive a electric vehicle or a different powered vehicle currently, which will soon be electric, you need roads to drive them on. And so we need to be investing in our roading network. It's critical to our country. And of course, then what's important is what drives on top and how we decarbonise that over the next 27 years. And so Dean gave a very good explanation around, I had the list of things that were announced by Simon Bridges back in 2016, but those policies did kick off and gave, I met with Simon on Monday, Simon Bridges on Monday, and he was telling me when he announced the road user charge exemption, there was something like 20 electric vehicles or something on the road. Now there's over 70,000, and so that just shows the growth over that period of time. And I think when he announced it, he probably wasn't expecting it. He obviously put the challenge in, he wasn't expecting that growth, but that's something which I think is great to see. It also announced the start of the electric vehicle charging rollout and all of those things. So that has started the process. The question we need now to answer is how we're going to get to the next level. And so National takes the view that one of the key issues that we need to focus on is around the electric vehicle charging piece. And so I want to talk about our views around the clean vehicle legislation, talk about the charging infrastructure, and then talk about some of the things that need to be done and all the ideas that we've got in that space. And so firstly, I guess the perception that the National Party has potentially got around electric vehicles is because we've opposed some of the government's policies, it potentially comes across that we have been quite negative towards electric vehicles. And I think Dean has distilled that in terms of our position. But I do want to make the point that a Christopher Luxon national government is committed to continuing along that journey and not walking things back. The one area where we do have a difference with the government is in relation to the clean car discount scheme, due to the fact that for two primary reasons. One, that it effectively taxes people for the choice that they currently don't have, farmers, tradies, people who need commercial vehicles or families who need a larger vehicle, and it effectively subsidises people who currently do have a choice. And so what we're saying is actually there are other ways that we can solve that problem, and we're open to finding other solutions to that. We've talked about it the last election, and we're talking about it again now. Is that questions around our depreciation rates? Is that questions around our fringe benefit taxes? Are there other types of short-term incentives that need to be put in place? And the reality is, and the government would say, well, it proves how popular the clean car discount has been. But the reality is, this was a scheme which was meant to be fiscally neutral. It's paid out 318 million. and it's received in 118 million. So the reality is it's only got 100 million left in the tank, and some changes will need to happen. This government will have to either increase the fees or decrease those rebates to be able to make it sustainable. That is coming if that scheme is to continue in its current form. They will have to make some significant and serious changes to it if that scheme is going to actually continue. So our view is actually, we don't see that as necessarily being the right tool, but we do want to continue to have some form of incentives, and we're keen to work with you around what those might look like. The bit that we are committed to continuing is the Clean Car Standard. And that is the bit which allows importers and the car importation industry to be able to continue to bring in vehicles that go to the manufacturers and to have that market power to be able to bring those vehicles into New Zealand. It then ensures that the curve of the emissions curve is bent over time, and will play a critical role in doing that. We agreed with Drive Electric submission and many of the submissions that were put forward by the car industry, car importation industry, that actually the standards may be too ambitious, particularly from about 2025 onwards. And we're open to working with the industry around what those should be. And it's critically important that any government works with the industry to make sure that those standards are achievable. And that means there needs to be an availability of vehicles and an affordability of vehicles for the New Zealand public to be able to actually be able to purchase those vehicles. And so we will work with the industry around that as if we are elected into office to make sure those standards are achievable, but continue to put pressure, because what we want to see ourselves as the fast follower, understanding the size of our market compared to other countries, but not the country which effectively just accepts what's left over. And that's why that standard is so important. The bit about electric vehicle charging, though, I think is the issue which I think needs much more significant attention in New Zealand. And so, yes, we now have, I think we're almost at the point where the state highway network has, I think, a charger every 75 kilometres. I think 97% there, which is good. But there's a lot more that needs to be done to actually make that work, so that New Zealanders have confidence if they are buying an electric vehicle, that they can make those distances work, and that there is a mix of chargers available, whether it's fast, whether it's a destination or other types, so that can actually work for them. And so what we're looking at is, I guess, 3 or 4 areas in that space which need to be addressed. The first is around electricity generation in New Zealand. If we're going to electrify our economy, or significant parts of our economy, we are going to need more generation. And there are significant barriers in place still to that generation and that investment being able to take place. And so there's a big piece of work that we need to look at, and we're working through, and we'll have from the election around how we're going to invest in electricity, or unlock investment in electricity generation would be the way to put it. The next bit is around the distribution networks, and we hear too often that the distribution networks have a mixed match of policies and procedures and cost structures around actually the charging companies being able to connect into that network. And so there is regulatory work that needs to be amended and fixed in that area. And there's also potentially some cost issues that need to be fixed as well. And so we're working through a number of potential policies around that. But the third bit is around the actual regulation from a council perspective. And councils across New Zealand currently have a wide range of policies when it comes to where EV chargers can be put in. My view is, if you can park there, you should be able to charge there. It's pretty simple. And actually, we've got to bust through the regulation and the red tape. Councils should not be a roadblock to EV charging networks being able to do installations. On-street car parking is going to have to become much easier to do, particularly in our more urbanised environments and inner city suburbs, where we're having the fastest uptake of electric vehicles in New Zealand. We're going to have to make that much easier. And so whether we need a national policy statement or some other effective regulation to bust through those regulations, that is certainly something that we're looking at to make sure we can get through that. And so, as I said, there's a number of things that we're looking at currently. We haven't announced our policy yet, But I hope that that gives you a range of ideas that we're currently looking at, because we agree with you in terms of what you're trying to achieve, whether it's for your business or for your city or for your country, that electrifying our transport fleet is critical to that pathway to decarbonisation. We believe that mobility is critical to our country's economy and to our social well-being. And so if we're going to do that, we have to have a serious set of policies which will achieve that. And we have to continue to look forward and work with the industry who will make many of those investment decisions and make sure that you have that certainty so you can do that in the long term as we work on that pathway together. So look, thank you very much for having us here. I hope that gives you a sense of where our mindset is at. And I look forward to continuing to engage with Drive Electric, but also everyone in the room. We have an open door policy when it comes to engaging with the sector. We are very open to hearing your views at any point, understand what the roadblocks are that you're facing, and hearing your ideas around how we can fix those, because ultimately government doesn't have all the answers. As much as governments like to think they do, the answers more often than not in rooms like this rather than in the beehive. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to taking questions and engaging further with you tonight. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, let's all now move through to that question time. So both gentlemen would love to know what some of those roadblocks are, and I'd love to know what some of the solutions are too, because as Simeon's mentioned, a lot of the answers can be within this particular room as well. Most of you are in the fleet businesses, so we need to know what you are seeing and feeling on a daily basis, what you like and dislike, and if you've got a roadblock, what are some of the solutions that you've thought about? We've got two willing gentlemen here that represent the National Party and the forming strategies, so your input will be very valid and appreciated. Who's got the first question?
Simeon, can you comment on that?
So I guess our view on that, it was a policy of ours at the last election around having some form of exemption around fringe benefit tax and in terms of electric vehicles. And I guess what I'm signalling here today is that we're looking at all options. We're looking at all possible solutions to consider to continue to support investment in electric vehicles in New Zealand. And that's certainly one of the possible tools that government, or levers that government does have. And so I guess my signal here is it's on the table.
Today's useless but interesting piece of information is that the Coromandel electorate at the last election had the largest number of +65 voters of any in the country. Got a lot of mature people, and a lot of them have been buying nice flash electric cars, but the majority of them do very small mileage each year, small kilometres each year. What I'm interested in, and I think Simeon as well, is it's the kilometres driven is actually, to a degree, more important than the number of vehicles. And so somehow we have to build scale to get fleets and then inevitably the second-hand vehicles that flow from the fleet scale into the economy quickly and fast. And so from our point of view, some of the question is around how do you build capacity? And it's all very nice and wonderful to have lovely Coromandel constituents buying nice EVs, but not driving them very far. When actually what we need to do is have the commercial vehicles, the high kilometre per year vehicles, the ones that are that are doing 100,000 k's a year rather than 10,000 k's a year. So that's sort of my thing.
So in that space, and thinking about fleet, government fleet is obviously a huge part of the equation. So where did you put that part of government adoption?
Yeah, so we're 100% committed to doing that. I would note it's been a little bit slow, and it could be faster. And government needs to lead by example on that. So we're committed to continuing that. As vehicles, I mean, the exception, there is a number of exceptions there in terms of emergency vehicles, but in terms of by and large the fleet, there's a lot of work that can be done.
And some of that is still constrained by practicalities. So again, I'm always going to be pushing the beautiful Coromandel. Come and visit and spend some money sometime. But at the moment, our roads, exactly, I was about to say, our roads are munted, particularly the main highway across Kopu-Hikuai. And so a week or so ago, I get taken up with the Minister of Transport to the slip or the fallout, where it is. And we've got NZTA vehicles there, and we've got some DOC vehicles and some other that sort of thing. A couple of them, the DOC people were in like my personal car, a little Kona, and there were a couple of NZTA people in little Konas as well. The little Konas aren't going to do the work that we need to fix my road in Coromandel. So we actually need to have some more range. Now that'll come, and it's great that they've got a few little Konas, but that breadth of vehicle style and use is still, it's coming fast, but it's not here quite yet.
Thank you. Just on the Coromandel point, I think.
Hallelujah.
I mean, they're going to be second-hand vehicles that are going to roll into the market as well.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with the people buying one at a time, but we're not going to get to where we need to go one vehicle at a time. Somehow we have to get critical mass and scale.
The question I have is around sunset dates for ICE vehicles. So I understand that the party has a commitment to choice, which we will support as well. But that signalling message to the rest of the world that we're not going to have ICE vehicles after a certain age, that's actually the big lever.
Yeah.
Private on.
Yeah, I guess at this stage, I'm not in the space where I'd say that that's something we should be making that decision just yet. I think the industry, the car manufacturing industry, is going to set that based upon, the big markets such as the EU and other countries actually effectively sending those signals themselves. And so I guess the point that I would make is, we could send that message and say, well, from 2035, whatever the year might be, we're not going to accept. But the reality is, you meet with manufacturers and importers, the change is happening faster and will happen to us. And the reality is there will be a date in the 2030s where you won't be able to purchase a brand new ICE vehicle. That will just happen. So I guess I'm not at the point where I think we need to be setting a policy date which says from this year onwards. I think that's going to be set by the industry and the manufacturers, which are quickly going down that route themselves.
Next question.
Hi, Simeon Scott, a little bit off piece, but I fit in that category of the aged population.
Surely not.
Surely not. I remember going over the harbour bridge and paying a toll motorbike back in the 1970s. This rebuild, I don't know what's the number, 2 billion. Is it 25A goes through
25A is the one.
I mean, what's the, again, I am a bit of a piece about infrastructure generally, but what are your thoughts on toll roads? At the moment, we've got 3. I think the rules are there has to be a viable alternative to go around it.
Yes. Look, if you look at, I've been in, Scott's been in Coromandel, I've been in Gisborne and Napier Hastings and having a look at some of this damage. And you're talking to the officials, they're likening this to worse than Kaikoura in terms of what they say it is, in terms of the damage. The damage to the network is severe, and it's still not stable in many places. So it's not sure what the cost is, but they're estimating 14 billion. Some of that will be insurance money. Some of that will need to be the Crown stepping in. But the reality is we need to look at new revenue into the system if we're going to actually build, not just to replace in this instance or to rebuild, but to actually build the networks that we need. If you look at Northland, it's effectively been cut off 3 times this year. That's appalling for a region which is an important part of our economy. And 150,000 people live up there. So we've got to do more work in terms of our infrastructure. It appalls me that this government has failed to start and complete a major transport project in their 5.5 years since they came to office. That has meant that pipeline has stopped, and we're not getting things done. On your specific point around tolling, look, I think we need to have an openness and have those conversations around how we pay for things.
No such thing as a free lunch.
Next question.
I think one is around the regulatory of the IMA, so maybe just the infrastructure development taking place at pipeline, widening of other buildings that might be and even why policy in there. That's one from the council. The second one is around on-street parking. There's a huge challenge of Europe. We reached the point of the talk about the region, experience, the same, and very that we're contributing for understanding on how on-street parking is handled, and then there's a lot of vital that comes into the structure and actually one of the sorry.
No, they are very relevant questions. I've spent 2 days this week sitting in the concert chamber of the Auckland Town Hall from 8:30 in the morning till 5, listening to people making submissions on the government's proposed replacement of the RMA. So, as I was saying earlier to someone, you guys are a very pleasant distraction compared to that. Just think back a bit about a few years ago when the telcos wanted to roll out 3G cell phone towers all around the countryside. And pretty much everywhere where they wanted to put one, the local neighbourhood complained and there were consenting issues and councils had different rules and one part of the country to the other and all that sort of stuff. And then effectively what we did in government was create a one rule that said basically telcos can put up towers. And personal view, I think we need something like that about charging infrastructure, particularly the on-street stuff. I'm a great fan of looking at what other jurisdictions do. And in other parts of the world, they've solved this problem already. Go to the UK and they've got a regulatory environment that allows for and there are companies that will do that. They operate in New Zealand, they just need to be allowed to do it and not get bogged down in red tape, that have the little pop-up sort of like little bollard things that literally come out of the footpath that will go cabling under the footpath into the residential home maybe, or part of a public linkage thing. Those solutions exist. We take a typically Kiwi approach of making it way harder than it needs to be. So part of the RMA stuff is about how do we get things done? How do we get things done faster? How do we get things done more economically? And EV charging infrastructure absolutely fits into that category, plus a whole lot of other stuff that we make hard for us here in New Zealand.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, look, I mean, the reality is, as I mentioned with those numbers, the government is going to change their subsidy scheme regardless. So those subsidies are not going to be as generous as they currently are. All those taxes are going to have to increase significantly to pay for it because it's not financially sustainable. So the model isn't it has been helpful in terms of we have seen a significant increase in low emission and electric vehicle uptake over the last couple of years, but that model is not sustainable. So it's going to change regardless. I guess what we're saying is there are other tools that we can use to continue to provide incentives, as I mentioned, whether that's around tax incentives, depreciation rates, whether it's some form of other type of subsidy, targeted subsidies. There are other tools that can be used from the toolbox, which are don't require that particular scheme, which we've taken a relatively strong view on in terms of how it charges a particular group of New Zealanders to help fund. So that's where we're coming from it at. But we're also cognizant of it. There's actually other parts of the puzzle which need to be solved. And whilst the clean card, and that's why we're also committed to the clean card standard as being a tool which allows importers to be able to make sure they're getting that mix and continuing to bring that mix into the New Zealand market, so that New Zealanders have that available in that choice. And I think Scott always talks the life cycle cost that people need to take into account as well. And we need to do a much better job about promoting the life cycle costs.
Time for 2 more questions. Think about the clean card discount and clean card scheme from a fleet company or a manufacturer point of view. Both pieces of legislation seem to be rushed through with a lack of consultation, which both have ended up being a burden for the very organisations that want to promote EVs with an EV uptake to the second-hand market. So how do we avoid that with whatever your replacement for the clean card discount is, and what should we be doing?
Well, I think the way we avoid that is through taking time to consult. Now, the history of this legislation was that it was brought in 2019, it was proposed in 2019, there was significant public backlash to it. Labor pulled it from the agenda, I think, because New Zealand first helped kill the idea. And then it wasn't campaigned on in 2020 by the Labor government. There was no campaign that they were going to introduce it again. And then suddenly it was announced again in the middle of 2021, and it was passed into law within a few months. So again, there was very little consultation. So there are ways that there are NZTA and the Ministry of Transport, they are very, I'm not sure how much, they are, their job is to consult and when it comes to policy changes and to make sure that these things happen. In this circumstance, the government's timeframe that they put in place is what didn't allow them to go through a proper process to make sure that the creases were ironed out, that the processes were actually able to be put in place from a bureaucratic perspective at NZTA. That's why there was had to be a fixed legislation rushed through Parliament at the end of last year. And so I guess from our perspective, take our time, but also listen to the industry and work with the industry to make sure that it is something which has got that broad support. So I think we're all in agreement about where we want to get to. It's just a matter of how we get there. And we're committed to make sure that we listen and engage in those conversations.
Good. Final question, just down the back. Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
So one around that sort of would be how does that's what it means. But everything's like how it's good, but it's got money to build.
Yes.
So orchestrating well designed national plan for industrial parks plan, state highway plan.
Yeah. So look, I think that's the kind of conversation we need to have around what should that look like in terms of and there's a range of things that need to be done to make that happen. So one, we need to be unlocking the regulatory framework so that it makes your investment decisions easier to make, and in some cases unlocking the cost framework from a distribution charging the distribution networks so that we can unlock some of those barriers. There will still be in some places cost prohibition, and so we're open to continuing to provide support, and we're working through that as part of our policy approach. As I mentioned before, it's around generation, distribution, and regulation, and potentially some support what that may look like to be able to make sure that it's the first mover disadvantage that these companies have in that EV charging space. But how do we make sure that's done in a strategic manner, not just simply in a sort of a non-strategic way is how we want to make that work. So look, as I said, we're keen to continue to engage and have these conversations. We don't want to go to the election just with aspirational, words. We want to have detail, and we want to have, targets, and we want to have things we will do which will make a tangible difference. And as Scott said, Christopher Luxon keeps asking us the question, but what are we going to do? And so that's the kind of things we want to be going to the election with. And so we want to hear from you as part of that conversation.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Okay, the guys are going to hang around for a little bit so we can start some networking, and feel free to ask them any other questions. Just because I can, a couple of other things for both of you gentlemen to think about. The role of hydrogen in the economy. Most people forget that actually hydrogen powers an electric vehicle, just a different fuel source, because that could be a very good thing for both our country and the promotion of mobility and decarbonise transport at the same time. The second one is we have 27 lines companies in this country. The UK has 6. You don't need to be a mathematician to ask why the hell we've got 27 to 6. I'm just thinking about efficiency, scale, getting a strategy through 27 versus 6. Could be some synergies there to think about. Big topic. And the other one is just domestic and home charging. 80% of charging EVs are actually done at home. The infrastructure publicly, absolutely critical, no issue with that whatsoever, particularly for the business environment. But when 80% of the current charging is done at home, we need something in that domestic environment for the everyday consumer to power their electric vehicle. I'll stop and I'll get off my horse then. I'd like to thank both of you gentlemen for coming along this evening and being very open with us. I can see the dialogue is clear and it's open with Drive Electric and our member audience. So thank you for that. Your honesty is appreciated as well. To our members, thank you for coming along this evening. To Custom Fleet, to Daniel, to Evoy, thank you very much. Well, I should say my apologies. Thank you for your premises and facility. To Hannah, who's put on this evening for the Drive Electric, I see Cal there somewhere too. Thank you to our team for putting them on. But to the membership, without you, we are nothing. So thank you for coming along. Please enjoy some hospitality down the back, and we'll see you at our next function.